The following is a presentation of Sertoba Media and Comin Media Incorporated.
The UFL will decide who will be the two teams fighting for the second championship this weekend. The CFL gets started for the 2025 season, and Aaron Rodgers decides where he's going to go for the 2025 NFL season. All that and more on the 87th edition of Total Football Talk. Welcome, one and all. It's that time again. We're back for Total Football Talk, episode 87, streaming right now. I am today's host, looking to be solo, looks like. At the moment, Drew Willingham. My man Cole has been busy with some career work outside of our podcasting duties, and hopefully we'll be able to make it at some point during the stream. If not, hopefully he can make it back by next week. My man's been dealing with a lot here lately. A loss of a loved one. Still, my heart goes out to him. Haven't seen him face to face here on the stream since 2 weeks ago when we were last together for episode 85, but have been talking to him just about every day, through text. And still great spirits. Miss my guy. Hopefully he can come on in today. If not, maybe, just maybe, got him back next week. But with all that great stuff, we're here for a great time for episode 87, Total Football Talks. We are live here on Sertoba Media and Comin Media, streaming simultaneously between the two platforms on YouTube, X, and on Twitch. Currently live, or if you're watching this in the replay once we are not live at some point with the next 2 hours of today, then you can see this and comment on it afterwards. But your live comments will be brought up as Sick Diggy is in the house, and I will bring him up on the screen here in just a second. Glad to have him here in the house, as well as the others that come on in throughout the show. As Sick says, what's good, everybody? What's good, Sick, all the way from Norway. Been working on a transition for 6 special appearances, whether it's on D Willie in the evening, or if it's just in the comment zone. I got a special transition been brewing up. Can probably debut that next week. Just got to get Cole's approval first, because of course this is Total Football Talk, our collaborative project. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night, says Sick Diggy, along with condolences to at Cole Sports and his entire family. Absolutely, my guy, love my guy Cole, and again my heart goes out to him. As I said in the opening monologue, is it a monologue? Opening statement? The delivery? Whatever it is, still figuring that out here in these streams. We got a lot to talk about here today. Got the UFL to discuss, the Week 10 recap, as well as the week, well, not week anymore, but the conference semifinal preview. And then we've got the CFL to recap. The first game of the season was last night. We got another game tonight, and then we got some more this weekend as well. 4 total games this weekend for the CFL and 2 for the UFL. And a lot left to discuss, as well as good old Aaron Rodgers has finally decided that he's going to play football. And we already been speculating all off season long where he was going to go. And we knew that he was going to make a decision before too late, because, of course, you got to get some time in with the team. And he made the decision to go to Pittsburgh. And we'll discuss that a little bit later in the program. But first, we're going to go to the opening drive and discuss what we have on tap here for the recap of this past week.
All right, let's go. We got trips, right? At 42, 989. On two. Ready? Ready.
And here for the opening drive, we're going to recap this past weekend for week 10 of the UFL. And we're going to start this off with the Arlington Renegades and the San Antonio Brahmas. And this game was an absolute cyphersaura. Mother, father, dumpster fire from one end of the field to the other, because you knew going into this the Brahmas were going to take that big old battle stick. Looking like a bunch of dumpster pelicans. It's been a minute since we've been on the loop with the dumpster pelican reel, and we're going to do it today because all we saw this past season for the 2025 season was dumpster pelican play by the UFL team known as the San Antonio Brahmas. They took the cake for who was the absolute worst in all of UFL football. I know that you just said football twice when you think about that on the other side, but hey, it's football because that's what it is here for spring football. UFL action. The San Antonio Brahmas are the number one dumpster pelican with the biggest beak off to the right for the UFL side of professional football. You know it, and I know it. Don't you deny it. Don't you deny me the right to sit here and bask in the glory of a team that absolutely was terrible, as Charles Barkley would say. And I got to give them some type of credit here. I mean, hey, they tried. They got a win. They did get a win throughout the year, but what I'm happy about is the Renegades got to 500. We're going to break this down here in a minute of how that happened, and it all starts with Luis Perez. Luis Perez, who's been the veteran of this Renegades team from start to finish pretty much since they came into existence for the XFL and for the now UFL together. When you put it all together and think about how this thing was constructed for their offense, it was all built around that quarterback in Luis Perez. And he gave him a pretty good game, 26 to 32 on the day for completions out of attempts for 283 passing yards, 2 carries on the day for 9 yards and a touchdown. Sal Cannella also had 5 receptions on the day for 86 yards. He's been a solid tight end connection for good old Luis Perez. I mean, he reminds me of good old Hawkinson, TJ Hawkinson in the NFL. And I said that last year for the comparison. I'm going to say it now. I like Sal Cannella on this team. Just unfortunately, altogether, they didn't have what it took to formulate a winning team for the playoffs, because 5-5 is just not good enough to make it in the playoffs in this UFL combination between the two leagues of the XFL and the USFL. But, you know, when you look at what they did on offense, their defense really was the big shining star of the day, with Caleb Johnson having 8 solo tackles, a sack, a tackle for loss, also had 4 sacks on the day altogether for that Renegades team. And, you know, last weekend when you see this game, the pressure that the Renegades defense put on the San Antonio Brahmas, that's why they won this game right here. Even though Perez had 283 passing yards, he did a great job. I mean, I wouldn't say it was participation award style good job, but he had a solid team around him on offense. The defense was putting pressure on that Brahmas offense, which is not hard to do considering the fact that they are 1-9 on the year. I mean, look at it. We've been talking about it all year long, 10 consecutive weeks for this league, just how awful it's been to watch. And there was high hopes for this team to start the year because they had just made it to the UFL Championship the year before, lost to the Birmingham Stallions, who have won 3 consecutive championships, gunning for a 4th. And we'll break that down here, you know, later in the episode. But altogether, with that and the Renegades special teams was pretty good on the day. When you look at Lucas Havsrick, he had 3 field goals out of 3 attempts for the day. You know, that contributed 9 points, and this Renegades team wins 23-6, a decisive victory. But I would say if we were to look at it, it was definitely the dumpster fire of the week. You know it, and I know it. It absolutely was the dumpster fire of the week. Before we go any further with this game, well, actually, no, I got to at least state this first. Kellen Mond for the Brahmas, the only really, it's not really a highlight, but the only thing to really note, because the Brahmas only put up 6 points all around, all three phases. Absolutely terrible to watch. But Kellen Mond has continued to struggle throughout this year. The Brahmas are going to have to retool this offseason before they come back into existence for 2026, because they didn't even look like they were in existence in 2025, going 1-9 out of 10 games. Right here, Kellen Mond 17-27 on this game for this past weekend, 150 passing yards, 3 carries on the day for 14 yards, almost at 100, but 3 carries on the ground for 14 yards, along with those 150 passing yards. Just absolutely terrible. And that's a highlight of their rushing attack. Their rushing attack was absolutely trash this past weekend. But let's see what you guys have to say out here in the comments before we go any further with that game breakdown. I'm going to need prescription windshields on my truck. Did Aaron Rodgers actually sign with the Steelers? There's possible scoff in the city of brotherly love, but definite cringe in the Steel City. Yes, and I will bring that back up here in a few. As Ryan McCoffey's in the house too, says contract the Brahmas and bring back the New Jersey Generals. Yes. Yes. Hey, there's too many teams in Texas. They need to relocate one of them. And I think San Antonio has proven, not only with the amount of fans that they get to come to watch these games, I think that they've proven that there's not enough interest in that team. You got teams like the Battlehawks, the Stallions, that are in other states, further away from Texas. I said it when they developed the UFL, and I'm going to say it again. They have way too many teams in Texas. You only need probably 2. The Renegades, I like. The Roughnecks, I like. I like having a team in Houston. I like having a team, even though it's too close to Jerry World. I like the Arlington team. I like how that is constructed. But the team, even though they made it to the UFL championship last year, and I like the name the Brahmas because it reminds me of the Brahma Bull, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, professional wrestling. Take me back to the Attitude Era, and considering the fact that he is part owner of the league. I've always wanted that team to succeed, but if you're going to look at the 3, the easiest one to relocate is the San Antonio Brahmas. You can move them to another state and still call them the Brahmas. Okay? So I would say move them to New Jersey and call them the New Jersey Brahmas. Let's do that. San Antonio Brahmas should relocate. Let's hashtag that and make it something. The Brahmas are the ultimate dumpster fire this entire season. Yes, absolutely. And we'll break down a little bit more of how that game went here in just a few, even though it was definitely a snooze fest. As for the Renegades, they should be glad that they finished the season at 500. Absolutely. And for the past 2 weeks, because they were 3-5 along with the Roughnecks, Cole and I, been talking about that, and I was hoping that they would win the previous week, which they did, to get to 4-5. And I was gunning for them this past week and picked them to win, of course, over the Brahmas. As I said, as long as they could win in week 9, they would absolutely 99.9% sure win the game for week 10 against the Brahmas, because they are absolutely terrible. They are absolute cringeworthy to watch this season. And that's why I think Wade Phillips stepped down after week 3 when they were 0-3 to start the season. San Antonio isn't a big market for football. That would be either Houston or Dallas. Yes, and with Arlington being close enough to Dallas, I would say that definitely qualifies Arlington to stay. Houston, of course, because of your statement, and relocate the San Antonio Brahmas to New Jersey. Give McCoffey a win and let him have his team over there in New Jersey. But I just think that they should just call them the Brahmas because I like the name. But you just got to move them. That's my vote. But yes, keep the comments coming, you guys. We're going to break this down a little bit more when it comes to this game right here in this opening drive. So when you look at this game and how it started, all right, we already knew going in that it was going to be an absolute dumpster fire to watch. And again, we're still talking about the Renegades and the Brahmas. But when you look at how things started off in the first quarter, it was looking pretty ugly because the Brahmas actually had the lead at the end of the first quarter because all the Renegades can muster up on their one drive that they had. They killed it. They killed a decent amount of clock, half the quarter, but he ended up fumbling after 8 plays, turning it over to the Brahmas, and the Brahmas go 75 yards on 13 plays, but pretty much crush the entirety of the first quarter with that time, and they get a field goal with clock management. They're up 3-0. They're actually leading at the end of the first quarter, which, if anybody put money on that game, which I'm not really like a heavy gambler, but sometimes, I'll throw a few bucks on some sportsbook things like every blue moon or whatnot. Just have a little fun. But with this game, if you would have bet on it for the Arlington Renegades to win, I mean, you were sweating. And if you decided to pick an upset, you were definitely having a great time at the end of the first quarter watching this game if you actually were invested into this game. And I think the only way somebody could truly get invested into this game is if you were actually betting on it. So, but more likely, if you bet on it, you were going to bet for the Renegades to win and get to 500. So at the end of the first quarter, you have the Brahmas up. The Renegades would say, "Not my house," even though this was on the road and it was in the Brahmas' house, but they would actually score a touchdown on the next drive. And this one right here, there were some penalties throughout the drive. When you look at the two that cost them a total of 15 yards in penalties, it definitely affected them, and it crushed a little bit more time. But Dede Hunter rushed to the left for a 9-yard touchdown on the ground to give the Renegades a lead. For the first time in the game, they would go up 6-3. They would fail on the 2-point conversion, though, and just be up 6-3. The Brahmas would punt on the next drive. The Renegades would make them pay with a touchdown to follow that. They would get the 2-point conversion to make it 14-3. And with the fumble by the Brahmas on the next drive, it looked absolutely redonkulous. I mean, absolutely redonkulous. They were absolutely falling back into their ways they had done in previous 8 losses of the year, because that fumble would turn into a field goal, followed by a punt on the next drive by the Brahmas, and they would then give up a field goal by the Renegades to be down 20-3 by the end of the first half. Going into halftime, then the table had flipped. You were feeling pretty good if you threw some money down on the Brahmas first quarter because they were up 3-0. Second quarter, reality checked, as the Renegades were absolutely beating them like a sack of dumpster pelicans by the end of that first half. Now, Brahmas, they would answer in the third quarter. They absolutely would. I'm telling you, man, they would. They would answer. But with just a field goal, and that would give them their 6 points for the day. And this would happen in the third quarter. They would be down 20-6 at this point. In the fourth quarter, the Renegades would score another field goal to go up 23-6. And that's about as much excitement as I can pump into this terrible expletive game, because that's how it felt watching this mother father on the screen. So with that, we're going to take this into an actual game. It's a little bit more exciting. I hope. You guys got to tell me what you think out here in the comments, because I don't think it gets as bad as this past one we just talked about. Now, this next one that we're going to talk about involves a team that has won 3 straight championships. And yes, that is the Birmingham Stallions, as they beat down on another team that's played like a bunch of dumpster pelicans this year, but actually has one more win than the previous team that we talked about. But even though I said this past one was bad, at least this one was exciting because you saw touchdowns scored in this game. You saw a bunch of actual scoring by one team, so it wasn't that bad. The other one was lackluster because you wanted to see at least more scoring if the Brahmas were going to be that bad. But here, you have the Stallions on the road against the Showboats, another game where we picked the road team to win this one, and they did not disappoint, as the Stallions win 46-9. Jamar Smith, 13-17 for 127 passing yards on the day with a passing touchdown, along with the carry for 2 yards. Andrew Peasley, the backup quarterback, had 9 passes for 14 yards, 9 passes for 14 attempts, 93 passing yards, 2 carries for 22 rushing yards as well. DeMarcus Gates, DeMarquis Gates, 6 solo tackles, for the defense for the Birmingham Stallions, along with Mario Goodrich's 5 solo tackles, 11 combined tackles between the two, absolutely beating up on the Showboats. One of Goodrich's tackles was for a tackle for loss as well. Tay Crowder also added 2 interceptions on the day. Well, actually, that was, yes, he added 2 interceptions on the day. Dresser Wynn had 13 passes for 24 attempts, and we completed 13 out of 24 attempts, 113 passing yards, 2 interceptions, a carry with 15 yards on the ground from that carry as well. Kyrie Woods had 5 solo tackles on the day to add to the Memphis Showboats, but hey, that wasn't enough. You can't rely on one player on the defense. And when your quarterback is literally passing the ball hand over fist to the other team, you're going to be giving them the leg up. You're going to be giving them the leg up. They're going to be taking the game here. 46-9 is your final score for this game. Now, when we break it down and we look at how things were for this team, it was absolutely wild to watch this game unfold. It was a little bit more exciting when you think about that in comparison to the other game where you have previously that we just talked about, no action from one team. You had a little bit here from the Showboats. They put a little bit more of a fight up, but at the same time, you got to take a look at the fact that you have a quarterback in Dresser Wynn who throughout the season had been playing pretty well. He wasn't turning the ball over too much. It was like he kind of caught the itis towards the end of this 2025 season. He really did. It's kind of tough to watch because the 2 games that they won, he absolutely was crushing for their team. I mean, he was my pick for Grand Champ of the Week at least once, maybe even twice. If I go back and I look at this, I think that when you look at everything as a whole, and you look at this team, the Memphis Showboats showed flashes this year, at least the first half of it, where you could depend on them, where you could depend on Dresser Wynn as your quarterback. But for the second half of the season, it was kind of tough to watch. It was tough to watch, not only that, but the team fall apart around him because they gave you hope. And I'm not just saying him at the quarterback position. He gave you hope all the way around. He really did. He wasn't turning the ball over, but in this game he did. And for that, we have to acknowledge the fact that he let you down if you were a fan of the Showboats this past weekend, because when you look at that and the fact that those 2 interceptions were thrown right to Tay Crowder on the other end of the ball, he hauled him in and took him in for touchdowns. Scored 2 touchdowns on those 2 interceptions. Took him for pick sixes, both to the house. I mean, you have to look at how he played this game. It was absolutely terrible when you look at Dresser Wynn and what he did. Absolutely terrible. But Tay Crowder benefited and had probably a career game as a result of it because he hauled in those 2 interceptions. He hauled in 2 touchdowns as a result, 2 pick sixes, and hopefully, we'll get a true shot at playing in the NFL in 2025 as a result of his actions this past weekend for Week 10. Now, when you look at how this game went from quarter to quarter, the Showboats, very much like the Brahmas at the beginning of the game, gave you hope because they were up 3-0 with a lead. But it didn't last throughout the end of the first quarter because the Stallions would then score. The Stallions would score on the next play. So, not the next play, but the next drive. They would go up 6-3. They would miss the 2-point conversion and be up 6-3. Now, as a result of an interception that was thrown on the next drive, they got 5 plays in, the Showboats did. They threw an interception that was returned by Tay Crowder, and that was converted for a 1-point conversion, which would give them a 13-3 lead at the end of the first quarter. So the Showboats would score twice, once for themselves, and then once for the other team for the first quarter to give them great momentum to carry into the second quarter. Looking at that, 13-3. How mother-fathering awesome is that when you can score twice in a quarter, contribute to a lead, but not even towards your own? 13-3, you were down at the end of the first quarter. Going into the second quarter, you have a touchdown finally by the Showboats. They get on the board besides an actual field goal. They would miss the 2-point conversion, though, and be down 13-9 as a result, but it would get much worse, much worse from there. As on the next drive, the Stallions would score a touchdown, and with that touchdown, they would go up 20-9, and that was a short pass for 10 yards from Smith to Rodgers for a touchdown, and their 1-point conversion would give them the 20-9 lead in the second quarter. The Showboats would then punt on the next drive, followed by a field goal by the Stallions. Then the Stallions would be up 23-9 as a result of that field goal, and that's how the first half would end. Very similar to the Renegades, where you have a pretty decent lead at that point, and it doesn't look like they're going to turn back. And they didn't, except for the Stallions actually kept scoring, and the Showboats kept letting them, because in the next half, you would have another touchdown by the Stallions at the third quarter of the first play, not the first play of the first drive. They would go 11 plays for 73 yards for a total of 6 minutes and 35 seconds. They would be up 29-9 as a result of a 1-point conversion that they would make on this drive. 29-9 is your score here. Oh, wait, no, my apologies. They'd actually miss that on that one because they'd only get 6 points for that. So 29-9 would be your score. The Showboats would then punt, followed by a field goal by the Stallions. They would be up 32-9 at the end of the third quarter. It got uglier from there. An interception on the next drive by the Showboats. And what do you think happened with that interception? Because Dresser Wynn threw 2 interceptions. And guess who was the beneficiary of that? Good old Tay Crowder, as he would be another great honorary time for him. It would be a great honorary time for him to run it back to the house for the second time in the game, adding to his highlight reel. And this right here was a 25-yard touchdown. They would then convert on the 1-point conversion attempt to go up 39-9. And then another touchdown would happen after the next punt on the next drive by the Showboats, as the Stallions would then score on 6 plays within that drive to go up 46-9 on another 1-point conversion. The game would end on that 46-9 score, and that's what you would see here at the end with 46-9 as your score. And for those scores, I was going to go ahead and take it into the comment section to see what you guys have to say as we just finished breaking down this absolute dumpster Pelican feast of a game. This Renegades 23-6 contest over the Brahmas, followed by the 46-9 contest over the Showboats. Those games are now in the books. Let's see what you guys got to say. Is there some hellos back and forth between Mr. McCoffey and good old Sick Dicky? We have the San Antonio comment, which was the next one, followed by, well, how big is football market in the New York, New Jersey area for spring football at Ryan McCarthy? Very good question. He says, hella is Sick Diggy. Hella. Love LL. Followed by the Brahmas defense was Swiss cheese. It absolutely was. He says, I mean, that's not the Albany Firebirds beating the Corpus Christi Tritons by 100-12, but that's quite a beating by the Stallions. Followed by, the San Antonio will always be a Spurs town, as Sick Diggy always has been and always will be. Exactly, at Ryan McCarthy, San Antonio is a basketball town. You'll probably see more fans at a UTSA Roadrunners game than a Brahmas game, as Sick Diggy. You are absolutely correct, Mr. McCoffey. It's followed by, Memphis was clearly all shook up. They absolutely were. 46-9. It is an absolute beatdown. And we're going to go ahead and take it into our next game that we're going to discuss here after this. And with this next game right here, I would say, by default, it kind of wins the game of the week. By default. Literally. Not the fact that you have Memphis all shook up, but the fact that we have, by default, a game of the week. And that game is between the Battlehawks and the Defenders. And I know I'm going a little out of order here, but hey, it's an out of order kind of day. With that, when we look at, we have a sudden pause. And that sudden pause is the fact that the Battlehawks and the Defenders graphic did not load. So, downloading it right now, simultaneously, so that way we can have it on the screen. Very disappointed in you, StreamYard. Also disappointed in myself for not catching that in time. But hey, stuff happens. Uploading it right now so that way you guys can have it on the screen. And it is uploading right now, the power of technology, and clicking a few buttons. Because we got to talk about this by default game of the week between the Battlehawks and the Defenders. As Battlehawks would improve to 8-2 here, the Defenders would fall to 6-4. But hey, they're going to face each other in the playoffs this week anyway, so it doesn't really matter. This game, by default, was the game of the week because these two teams actually had something to play for in the fact of momentum going into the playoffs. And it looks like the Battlehawks have all the momentum here, in my opinion, because Brandon Silvers did pretty solid in his one half of play. He only played the first half. But this game was also affected by a lot of rain. It was like a slip and slide fest when you watch it from start to end. It was kind of tough to play in it. So I get why they were kind of cautious with their starters and also, making sure that they can kind of skate through this without any severe injuries or without getting banged up too bad. Because Brandon Silvers for the Battlehawks, 6 of 8 on the day for 105 passing yards, 2 carries for -2 yards on the day as well. Jarvion Howard, 19 carries for 89 yards and a touchdown on the ground. Definitely a spark for this team, and the fact that they have a running game is the reason why they are 8-2 right now. They have had the league's best rushing attack throughout the entire season. So this kind of helped them by default make it the game of the week because it was close between two teams that are going to be facing off in this upcoming week. So by default, that's why I had to put it as game of the week right here. Miles Sims, 6 solo tackles on the day for the defense for the Battlehawks. You also got to see on the other side for the Defenders, Mike DeLelio, 18 of 26 for completions out of attempts for 142 passing yards and a passing touchdown. 10 carries for 60 yards as well. Trey Dean on the defense had 5 solo tackles, 2 tackles for a loss. But the big story here is they couldn't rely on their kicker. Had their kicker made the 2 field goals that he was up there for, they would have won 14-13. He missed 2 field goals out of 2 attempts, which is why they lost this game, in my opinion. I mean, it was tough. The Battlehawks in the first half, they were scoring, but in the second half, they let off the gas. They weren't really trying as hard because they already knew the season was a wrap. Whether they were 7-3 to end the year, they were the team of the league this year. The Stallions, limped their way into the playoffs and limped their way to a 7-3 record. It was tough for them this season. But for this team right here in the Battlehawks, they fought hard. Big changes throughout the organization, a new starting quarterback for the season, a lot of different changes within that offense too. You got to look at that. So when you look at the Battlehawks here and what they've done for the season, they are the grand champs of the season. But for this game, the story is that the 2 field goals missed by the Defenders are why they lost this game. And with that being said, we're going to go ahead and kind of skip through this one because there's not too much to really break down besides that because the rain and the weather really affected the game a whole lot. They weren't really playing but so hard because they have a whole lot to play for this upcoming week for the conference championships. So for that, I'm going to go ahead and skip that into the upset of the week because that's kind of more impactful in this episode, in my opinion, than the game of the week. And for our upset of the week, going with the Roughnecks over the Panthers. The Roughnecks, just like the Renegades, improving to a 5-5 record. on the season, and a team that was very similar to the Brahmas, who played very bad this year, and the Showboats, who played pretty bad as well. Those two teams are, in comparison to how the Roughnecks were for the past few seasons, and actually turned it around to win the past 2 games. Another team like the Renegades, very similar, 3-5 after week 8, and needed to win these past 2 weeks in order to do it. And with this, I said last week that they needed to win week 9, but they also, if they did, they need to carry that momentum into the game against the Panthers, who won't be playing but so hard because they're already in the playoffs as well. So looking at this for what it is, very big upset on the week when you look at the fact that they pulled it off against a very tough team in the Panthers, who have been kind of slipping over the past few weeks. Very similar to how the Stallions have. The USFL conference is not as strong as it once was, and it could be balancing out a little bit more for the XFL division. So right here, you look at the fact that Jalen McClendon, who's been the starter for the Roughnecks this season and definitely has improved throughout the year, 17 of 31 on the day for 193 passing yards, 3 carries on the day for 1 yard as well. Marvin Moody added an interception on defense, as well as Keenan Isaac with an interception as well. Marvin Moody had a touchdown with that interception that he had for a pick 6. JT Tyler added a fumble recovery, and TJ Franklin did as well. The Roughnecks defense combined 2 interceptions, one of them for a touchdown, and 2 fumble recoveries. Danny Etling for the Panthers, 5 of 12 on the day for 70 passing yards and an interception, along with 6 carries for 26 yards on the ground. Rocky Lombardi had 8 carries for 18. Oh, no, he was 8 of 18 passing for 61 yards in the air with an interception, along with 3 carries for 30 yards on the ground. The Panthers offense added 149 rushing yards all around to kind of contribute to the Panthers' production. But the fact that you had the interceptions by the 2 quarterbacks, Etling and Lombardi, and one of those going for a pick 6, didn't really help their cause out. Nate McCrary, though, had 12 carries on the ground for 68 yards for the Panthers, as well as 2 receptions for 15 yards on the receiving side of things. Noah Dawkins, 6 solo tackles on the day. And that's pretty much what rounded out for the Panthers statistically. But when we take a look at the Panthers as a whole, like I said, they kind of slipped over the past few weeks, over the past month, after starting out pretty hot. And, I'm afraid the momentum might not be on their side. The Stallions might limp their way into the conference, through the conference final and into the UFL championship this year. It's very, very possible that this could happen, because I just don't like the way the Panthers are looking on the field. Yes, they rested some starters. They kept the big names off the field for the most part, because it's not like they had much to play for. They wouldn't have gotten a home game out of it. Looking at it for what it is, Nate McCrary was big for the Panthers on the day. That's about it. But outside of him on the ground, it was kind of quiet, because throughout the first quarter, it was all Roughnecks. They were up 7-0 at the end of the first quarter. And even going into the halftime, they were up 16-3. They absolutely dominated. On one of those interceptions, they scored, and they were up 13-0 with 8 seconds left in the third quarter, the second quarter. So, followed by a pair of field goals along with that production throughout the second quarter. The Roughnecks are going into halftime 16-3, and they didn't look back. As in the third quarter, even though they'd give up a touchdown to the Panthers, they'd also add another field goal and be up 19-9 at the end of the third. And they'd only give up a field goal in the fourth quarter, as it was pretty ugly. There was a couple turnovers by the Panthers, an interception, a fumble, and the Roughnecks would capitalize with the field goal on that. And that's how the game would end. It would be pretty ugly. Even though it was an upset, it was just a downright terrible game, to look at. If you were rooting for the Panthers, you were absolutely sick to watch this game. If you're a fan of the Roughnecks, you absolutely love the result. You love the fact that they fought over the past 2 weeks to get you 2 wins in a row, and you end the season with the 500 record. A lot of positive things to say for not only the Roughnecks to end the year, but for the Renegades. And, you know, with that being the final game of Week 10 that we're recapping here, I have to say, like, that was the bright spot for the teams that underachieved, was watching the Renegades and the Roughnecks come from behind, you know, 2 games under 500 to get to 500 to end the season. And it was nice. Absolutely good to watch. If you're a fan of the UFL, you absolutely loved watching that, as well as we are here for episode 87 of Total Football Talk. We are streaming right now. You're seeing this float across your screen as we are streaming live for the 87th time. You might be watching this live. You might be watching this syndicated, depending on when you are watching. But hey, thank you for tuning in. And thank you to those who are commenting live and or in the replay. We greatly appreciate the input. And if you have any suggestions, bring them on in to the program. Sick Diggy also says consistency is needed in a season this short, but it's also a war of attrition. That's beautifully said. That's absolutely true for leagues like this that have 10 weeks, no bye weeks, just 10 straight games. A lot of teams can get sloppy when they're ahead and lose focus. Absolutely. Houston should also be glad, but not happy to finish the season at 500. Yes, both teams should definitely be counting their lucky stars for that one, as the Roughnecks will be focusing on next season and what to improve. Same for the Renegades. Absolutely, absolutely, and absolutely right here. We'll keep those comments coming in, Sick. Everybody keep those comments coming in, as we're going to go ahead and take it into our first commercial break here of the program. Give myself a little bit of a breather since I am going solo today. And when we come back, we got a whole lot to talk about here on the other side.
All right, let's go. We got trips, right? At 42, 989 on 2 on 2 on 2. Ready? Ready.
We're just getting started. Total Football Talk will return right after this. Whether it's news, the largest egg producer finds bird flu in chickens at a Texas plant, weather, devastating tornadoes rip through the heart of the United States, inspiration, a breast cancer survivor completed the journey of chemotherapy and now begins a future one of matrimony, or sports. Michael Jordan is shown on a photo with Diddy. LeBron James has a video extolling the virtues of a Diddy party. This has been yet another beating a dead horse presentation. We got you covered. BS3 Network, in association with Comin Media Incorporated, proudly present The Morning Shift with Cole Johnson. Live every weekday at 8 a.m. Eastern, 7 a.m. Central. Hey, Eagles fan, join my man Cool McCain and a host of others as they break down every single game, every single week in an objective manner, and also from a fan's perspective as well. Remember, this cast feels just like you. Nobody likes you. And you don't care. Fly, Eagles, fly. Eagles Elite Podcast, every Wednesday at 8:30 p.m. Eastern on YouTube and other podcast outlets.
Everything Boston. I love you morons. New Kids on the Block, New Edition,
Dear whatever the law firm is. Sincerely, the U.S. Supreme Court.
Ben Affleck, Matt Damon. Go yourself again, Jason
Where are my dogs? So we got to talk about the grand champ of the week. And even though my man Cole is not here at this time, we're going to have to talk about his pick for the grand champ of the week. And he picked Luis Perez, 26-32 for completions out of attempts, 283 passing yards, 2 carries on the day for 9 rushing yards, 1 rushing touchdown as a result of those 2 carries, and 103.5 QBR with no turnovers. That is Cole's selection for the grand champ of the week. Now mine, I'm going to go with someone of the defense. I'm going to go with good old Tay Crowder of the Birmingham Stallions. The Birmingham Stallions. 1 tackle on the day, 2 interceptions, and 2 touchdowns. That's what he added on the day. Absolutely did his job and contributed towards the victory here. You got to give it up for Tay Crowder, who had 2 touchdowns, 2 pick sixes on the day. And that's my selection for the grand champ of the week. Yes, that's my selection. As we are back for episode 87 of Total Football Talk that's streaming live right now, as you can find right here on your program. As we have plenty of things left to discuss in this shortened edition with the solo edition of the program. As you have a 2-minute drill right in your face. The 2-minute drill involves 4 teams, 2 games, conference final that, with this conference semifinal, determines who goes to the UFL championship between the Michigan Panthers, the Birmingham Stallions on Sunday at 3 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time on ABC, followed by the DC Defenders and the St. Louis Battlehawks in St. Louis for the XFL Conference Final at 6 o'clock p.m. on Fox. Between these 2 teams right now, Birmingham is favored with the spread of 1.5 of this game, as they are the team that has won 3 consecutive championships, 2 in the USFL for the final 2 years of that league, and the first of the UFL this past year in 2024. You got to take a look at both of these teams. They've kind of limped their way into the playoffs. I know 7-3. You kind of look at that and say, Drew, that doesn't look like a record they would limp in, but you're only 2 games over 500 in a league that plays 2 games, and they just haven't looked like themselves this year. Jamar Smith has brought a bright spot to that quarterback position for the Stallions, but has not, been as consistent as what Matt Corral was at the quarterback position for them. The Panthers started off the year really hot, and then they kind of fizzled out towards the end, and they kind of limp into this playoffs with a 6-4 record, looking like a team that, as a result of this past game against the Roughnecks, not like themselves. So I would have to say, I wouldn't say hands down, but I think because of what I just said, it kind of gives the edge to the Stallions. Even though it hasn't been pretty, they found a way to get to 7 wins, get to the favorite of the USFL conference as they have been over the past 3 seasons. And now you have them going to the finals of the UFL to determine who is the champ for this year. For the next game that we have for the XFL Conference Final, we're going with the DC Defenders and the St. Louis Battlehawks. This game right here at 6 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time on Fox. The Defenders coming into this very similar to the Panthers on the other side. The wind has been taken out of their sails. They come into this playoff run at 6-4 after starting the season very, very hot. St. Louis Battlehawks, though, have been hot from start to finish. Yes, they lost 2 games, but they are 8-2 for a reason. They have been doing what it takes to win games the smart way, even though some of these games kind of fell in their lap, like this past one where the defenders missed 2 field goals to lose the game 13-8. But I digress. With that being said, I don't think the defenders are going to miss this upcoming weekend, but I also don't think it's going to be enough to beat the Battlehawks. They've got the momentum on their side. They have the defenders' number, and they've had it over the past couple of seasons. And I'm going to have to say, because of that, the Battlehawks win this game. It will be, in my opinion, the St. Louis Battlehawks hosting the Birmingham Stallions in St. Louis for the UFL Championship, as regardless of who wins this game, the championship is in St. Louis, based on the fans, based on the outcomes of the people that would come there. It would be a better game for Fox Television, for primetime television, to have a spring game on some type of primetime for a championship game. With that being said, that is our wrap for this 2-minute drill version of the UFL. We now have to take it into another segment, and that is the Gridiron Scoop. So we got some things to discuss within the Gridiron Scoop to break down in stories for the week. But I'm looking for the little button to click, and I don't see that unit. There's usually a button to click that we have. And I found it. I found the button. Sorry for the technical difficulties. I am missing Cole right now, as this is a 2-person show. But right here and now, when it comes to this program, we got some things to talk about in the Gridiron Scoop. Now, not a whole lot for this week, because with the NFL, there's not so much news, except for a big-time quarterback signing, but we'll get into that here in a minute. With this team right here, we got to take a look at the Indianapolis Colts, who lost their owner very recently in Anthony Richardson, who was sidelined with a shoulder injury. You lose your owner, you got your quarterback that's fighting for the number 1 spot, even though you did sign Danny Dimes as insurance for a 1-year, $10 million deal. That's more than likely going to be your starter now for the first week of the season, because you take a look at this injury and it doesn't look good for him for the short term. But the question here is, how will this injury shape his long-term future? And in my opinion, I don't think it looks good for him. Considering the fact that he took himself out of a game last year because he was quote unquote tired. Okay. He was tired. Okay. Tired. Now his shoulder's tired. And he's now hurt. So with that being said, you haven't even gotten to contact. You haven't gotten to OTAs. You've gotten to no physical contact of practice, even though the quarterbacks wear their jerseys. They have the yellow jerseys on, don't the red jerseys, whichever one. Did not tackle them. Okay. You have an injured shoulder now, non-contact. Just throwing the ball. And when the question comes about of how will this injury shape his long-term future, it will shape it in not a positive light, in my opinion. I don't think that it's going to be a great future for him in Indianapolis. I think he's going to have to go somewhere else, kind of like Justin Fields went from Chicago to Pittsburgh to now he's in New York with the Jets. I think he's going to have to bounce around a little bit before he finds his footing, and if he does, because it's just not looking good for him in Indianapolis. I have a feeling with the Colts this year, and you can say what you want, but I have a feeling that this short period of time that Daniel Jones was in Minnesota, Kevin McConnell was able to unlock something within him, and he should be able to present some positive results, because we've already seen a good season out of him before, even though everything else before and after was very dismal and bleak. But I think this year for the Indianapolis Colts, you have a really good chance of getting some positive production out of Daniel Jones, given the fact that the road's now been paved for the most part by Richardson for the starting position in Indianapolis to be given to Daniel Jones. And that's my take on this one, because how will it shape his long-term future? The question is not good for the Indianapolis Colts. For his career, I don't think it's over, but in Indianapolis, I think it's definitely not the beginning of the end, because I think that happened last year when he took himself out of the game, and that's why they brought in Danny Dimes this offseason. I think this is a continuance of the end, as we're now in the middle road of it for Anthony Richardson, and not for him being in Indianapolis, because I think Daniel Jones is going to become the starter and actually take advantage of the opportunity from what it becomes this season. So shout out to Danny Dimes. You're not in our division anymore, so I hope the best for you. Hopefully you can prove the naysayers wrong, because you always like to see a good comeback story. And I think this Anthony Richardson story right here of him and his injury, in the long-term future of it impacts him big time in Indianapolis. But I think it also impacts Daniel Jones to step right in and get an opportunity. Will he actually, fulfill it and make good on it and become something in Indianapolis? Who knows? He's got the support of Pat McAfee and company, though. You know that. Other than that, while I not headbutt a microphone, Daniel Jones becomes a starter in Indianapolis. Anthony Richardson gets traded by the end of the season or during next offseason. That's my prediction for his long-term future in the NFL. But for how he recovers, only time will tell on how that will happen. Now, with that being said, the main topic, the reason why you tuned in to number 87 of Total Football Talk today, we have to talk about the main topic here, and that is veteran quarterback Aaron Rodgers agrees to a 1-year deal with the Pittsburgh Steelers. Aaron Rodgers' contract, 1 year long with the Steelers. And with this, he does it for $20 million. They're going to give him $20 million to play, because if you figure you play 17 games and you win 17 games and you have the division, the conference, and the Super Bowl, if they do get to the Super Bowl, it's basically like he averages throughout $1 million a game. Aaron Rodgers manipulated the market again. Got in there. Now, officially on June 6th, is a Pittsburgh Steeler and will be at OTAs next week. The drama is over. You finally have a quarterback in Pittsburgh. Does the signing make the Steelers an AFC frontrunner? I'm going to answer that with this. Followed by, because no, I do not think this makes them a frontrunner. I do think that we'll see the best quarterback play for the Pittsburgh Steelers since Big Ben's last year of his prime, which has been a while, because he's been retired for a couple of years, and even the last few years of his career, he was not looking like Big Ben of prime. So for the first time in like a half a decade or so, even longer potentially, you'll actually see positive results, I think, at quarterback, if they can keep him upright, depending on how that offensive line does. He stays healthy, and with the weapons around him, I think he has a good shot of having definitely a 9-8 year. Definitely a 9-8 year, over 500. I think they can potentially win 10 games, maybe 11. Maybe 11, be 11-6, squeak into the playoffs. Play a wild card game. Win that game potentially. But in the division round, I think that they lose. I think they lose the division round. I don't see them getting past that. So with that being said, will this move for Rodgers make them a front runner? I don't believe so. I think that they'll have success. Yes, that they'll win games. But I don't think that they're going to actually be a success in the fact of winning a Super Bowl, or a front runner in the fact that they're going to make even to the AFC conference game. I could be totally wrong. People out there who feel the same way could be wrong with me, but I'm going off a fact of what we saw over the past 2 years. The first year in New York, you can't completely throw at Aaron Rodgers because the offensive line failed him 4 plays into the season, and he got hurt, okay? But last year, even though it did seem like it took him about a half of a year to knock the rust off, the team overall didn't perform well around him, and it's a team game. It's not an individual game. So that the team can perform well around you, kind of uplifts you to that point, then you'll be good. There were some games towards the end of the season that he actually did look like the Aaron Rodgers of old and showed flashes, which is why, in my opinion, this whole hype for him this whole past offseason has been what it was, because he actually produced towards the end of the year. If Aaron Rodgers would have played like he did to start the year last year, those first 7, 8, 9 games, like he did in New York last year, we wouldn't even be having all this drama and speculation for the Pittsburgh Steelers. We would not have that whatsoever. It would not be happening. There's no way you have that happening here and now. But for this team in Pittsburgh, for what they needed, they weren't going to do anything with Mason Rudolph, in my opinion, for 17 games of a season. Could he fill in for a few games here and there and help out the cause like he did in Tennessee? Oh, yeah, I think he could. But for a starter in Pittsburgh, no, I don't think so. I don't think that that's the case for him. And the Pittsburgh Steelers didn't think that either, which is why they made the move and paid Aaron Rodgers $20 million. They made the move for DK Metcalf to give him the receiver that he would like to play with. They moved Pickens to Dallas to where there wouldn't be a diva fest in the locker room. But for this team right here and now, for what they've got with Aaron Rodgers, there's no way, in my opinion, that this team has become a front runner because of what this guy has done. Okay. Because of what this guy's done over the past 2 years to his team in the Jets, how he handled that situation right there. I just don't believe that this team right here has what it takes to knock off even the Chiefs as lackluster as they looked limping into the Super Bowl last year. You got other teams like the Texans who are looking to rebound from what they did last year. You got some younger teams that made some moves in the drafts, like the Jags, that might surprise other teams out there this year and win some games that you're not even expecting them to win. So with that being said, those other AFC teams that I have mentioned, I have got to mention them ahead. Especially the Bills. I got to mention the Bills ahead of them too, because the Bills are, the Ravens. All these other teams and the Ravens in the same division have a better chance of doing and making more of an impact than Aaron Rodgers and the team around him for Pittsburgh. TJ Watt, definitely a big difference maker on the defense. You got Pat Freiermuth as a tight end for the offense. I think you need to make another move, though, and they've been talking about getting Jonnu Smith from the Dolphins and bringing him over to kind of be a 1A to the 1B for Pat Freiermuth. That would be a nasty tandem with the 2 tight end offense. Then you have DK. Got to mix it up a little bit with the running back situation, but it could be doable. It could work. But for this right here, this story, and good old Aaron Rodgers, I'm not buying them as an AFC front runner for this topic. With that being said, we're going to go ahead and take it into the next topic. And with that, we're going to go back to, I wouldn't say we can't really go back to the opening drive, but I'm going to kind of shift it with a transition to kind of shift it that way to where we can recap a game from last night for the CFL. And that game will be a game that I'm going to get very, very hype about right here and right now. And that game was between the Ottawa Red Blacks and a team that I get excited about each and every time I talk about them, because they are my team, the Saskatchewan Roughriders. As the Rough Riders won this game 31-26 at home for this week 1 contest. Trevor Harris, 19 of 26 for 277 yards on the day, with 2 passing touchdowns and an interception, along with a carry for 4 yards on the ground. Samuel Emilus had 8 receptions for 133 yards and a touchdown, along with Jameer Thurman, who had 10 tackles for a sack as well on defense. Malik Carney had 2 sacks on the day, along with the Rough Riders defense, who had 4 sacks for the team. Drew Brown on the other side for the Red Blacks. He had a pretty solid year last year, and he had a solid game here. Just not enough to tip the scales for the Red Blacks. 34 of 41 on the day for 413 yards and 2 touchdowns, with a carry for 0 yards. Justin Hardy had 8 receptions for 133 yards and a touchdown. Braylon Addison added 8 receptions for 112 yards in the air, along with a carry for 1 yard. Adrian Fry on defense had 2 forced fumbles, as well as a fumble recovery. And CJ Colden had an interception as well, but it wasn't enough to give the Red Blacks the edge in this game. When you look at the fact that Harris threw the interception, it should have tipped the scales in favor to the Red Blacks, but they kept plugging away and kept having opportunities that the Red Blacks were not taking advantage of, and the Rough Riders were able to do so. 277 passing yards on the day with the 2 touchdowns is nice, but at the end of the day, when you look at how things were for this team known as the Rough Riders, they just had the momentum. They had a momentum from start to finish. The game was at their field. It was at home for them in week 1. They had the momentum there. They had the fans on their side. At the end of the first quarter, though, the Red Blacks didn't give an expletive because the Red Blacks were up 7-0 at the end of the first quarter. And, they tried not to look back, but unfortunately they did, because they let the Rough Riders catch up to them as they scored 17 points in the second quarter. And the Red Blacks couldn't even answer to that. They would be down 17-7 at halftime, with the Rough Riders leading and the momentum heavily on their side. Going into the third quarter, the Rough Riders would score another 2 touchdowns, along with giving up a touchdown to the Red Blacks. Even though they gave up a touchdown, they'd only given up 14 total points on the day. They were still up 31-14 at the end of the third quarter. And it was enough of a safety net for this team to actually cruise on in through the fourth quarter, as they wouldn't score it all in the fourth quarter. They would give up 12 points to the Red Blacks. With those 12 points, it would bring it to a 5-point game, and that's how it would end. 31-26, the Rough Riders take this game for week 1 of the CFL action. And right here, big kudos to this team. It was a big team win for holding on, and the Rough Riders defense with the 4 sacks put the pressure on the other team. And even though, both teams scored a lot of points, you got to look at this for what it is, as far as the defense is putting the pressure on each other, which forced the turnovers, the fumbles, the interceptions, all that stuff. But Drew Brown continues to put up big numbers in the air. It seems like he throws for 400 yards every single game I'm watching him play. Last year for the Red Blacks, this year again. Trevor Harris, barely under 300 passing yards, but the interception definitely plagued him to where it affected the production for this team. They just got lucky enough to pull it off with the win at home, because the Red Blacks, just had too much of a deficit they had to climb back from, starting from the first half through the third quarter, and then trying to come back with those 12 points just wasn't enough to make it happen in this game. And for that, it's unfortunate for them, but for my team known as the Saskatchewan Rough Riders of the CFL, I mother, father, and love it. I absolutely love it. The fact that they pulled it off with the victory. And I've said a lot here over the past couple segments without going to the chat. So with that, I'd like to go ahead and go to the chat for a minute and bring the focus on you. With that being said, 6 says, the Roughnecks will be focusing on next season and what to improve. Same for the Renegades. Absolutely, as those were the two teams that were at 500 in the year. It never gets old hearing Wise Al Jefes go off on Boston. Absolutely, for the commercial. Let the dogs out. Let them out. Absolutely, as we had the grand champ for this past segment. I definitely have a soft spot for the Rottweilers. I mean, I think we all do. They are great dogs out there in these streets. Battlehawks will take the XFL Conference Finals unless they slip up and the defenders capitalize. And their defense is one you can't really slip up with because they do have a pretty decent secondary, but their front's kind of struggled over the past few weeks, so I'm a little concerned over that. Meanwhile, Michigan should play spoiler against Birmingham. Okay. Well, I will. I'd like to see that happen, but I just don't see it. I just don't, because the way the momentum has not been on the side for that team over the past month, I just can't go with it. I just can't. Fortunately, the Colts also have young quarterbacks in Jason Bean and Riley Leonard to back up Daniel Jones. Absolutely. Wait, $20 million for a single season? Absolutely. That's what he signed for, $20 million. Mike Tomlin should be screaming, "Are you kidding me?" I've got family that are Steelers fans, and they're probably looking at this like, what? Absolutely. Mason Rudolph and Skylar Thompson should stay ready in case Rodgers starts messing up. Buckle up, Pittsburgh. This upcoming season might be a long one. I wonder if the average Steelers fan is feeling a little scared right now. If they're a little concerned, you know. At least for Steelers fans, at the end of the day, you're not this.
This has been yet another Beating a Dead Horse presentation.
Even though it's still going to be a long season, I agree with you, Sick Diggy. And the Rough Riders were thinking, we're not losing at home on the opening day. Yes, they absolutely were not. And the fact that they were still a solid team last year. I mean, they made moves. They were a very exciting team to cover, as well as a fan of. And I'm glad that you were able to have that laugh there, Sick Diggy. Rest in peace, Charlie Murphy. This has been a pretty funny episode, regardless of rolling solo or not. Still has been fun, and thank you for being in the comments to help it stay as active as it can be with these comments, because you're making it fun for myself as well. We're increasing the fun. It's already fun, but increasing the fun out here in these streams. With that being said, we've gone through kind of the 2-minute drills. This, we did sort of a opening drive, kind of a recap of this past game for CFL, as we went a little out of order because of the UFL games, but we did get it in. We did discuss the CFL game from last night. We do have to preview still, or show a preview of this upcoming game the upcoming games for the next 3 games for tonight, tomorrow as well. With that being said, we're going to get to that here shortly. But I want to go over one more thing before we even get closer towards that, and that is my pick. You know what that pick is for. The Snowflake of the Week. With the Snowflake of the Week, we have to discuss my pick as well as Cole's picks for the Snowflake of the Week. And we'll start with Cole's. Cole's pick is Stefon Diggs for displaying dumpster pelican-like behavior on a boat. We all know about the story about Stefon Diggs and what he did last week, as we covered it on last week's episode. And Cole chose, and was not here to discuss, but he chose Stefon Diggs for displaying dumpster pelican-like behavior on a boat. And that's Cole's pick for Snowflake of the Week. Mine for the CFL, soon to be probably, if he keeps it up, throw him that way, maybe, for a box of peanuts. Dresser Win. My Snowflake of the Week for the UFL, 13 to 24 in completions out of attempts, 113 passing yards for the Memphis Showboats, including 2 interceptions. He did have 1 rush for 15 yards. Cool. But he had 32.1 QBR. A surprisingly certified dumpster Pelican performance because he is not known to throw interceptions like this in this upcoming season, like this, not the upcoming, but this past season. He did have some rough games, but not nearly as bad as that one right there. So for the Snowflake of the Week, we have Dresser Win, 2 interceptions, 1 rush for 15 yards, a 32.1 QBR. That is my selection for the Snowflake of the Week. With that being said, we're going to take this into our final commercial break before we come back and preview the CFL's Week 1 action for the final 3 teams that are still left to play for this CFL week. But we will be back after this last commercial break to discuss that here shortly.
Later, the post game. But coming up next, the 2-minute drill. This is Total Football Talk. Comin Media Incorporated. Creating content magic in the real world.
In a world where chronicles of the past are brought to the streams, whether the content is relatable or completely beyond your realm of life, there is no shadow of a doubt that this show is absolutely full of shenanigans. Get ready for
D. Willie in the evening.
this Sunday at 10:05 p.m. Eastern.
Exclusively on Sartoba Media, where the struggle is real to be awesome.
Hey, ladies and gentlemen. Hey, look. Hey, stop playing games. Y'all already know. Go ahead and toss him some Willie Bucks. Ain't nobody playing around. Hey, $ D Willie 87. Go ahead, hit him up on the Cash App, and go ahead and give him some Willie Bucks. Look at Drew looking stoic, ladies and gentlemen. Stoic on that $10 bill. So go ahead, slide my man over some Willie Bucks, and we good. That's all I'm saying. We good. How about some Willie Bucks?
Sartoba Media, where the struggle is real to be awesome.
Oh, yes. The tradition, the pageantry, the spectacle, the history, the slut. Wait. I gotta rep my brother's stuff right. All my DMV soldiers, stand up! And welcome to the Commander's Gridiron Report. If you want your Commanders to be repped right, well, D. Willie is your man. Commander's Gridiron Report. Every Tuesday at 1:05 p.m. Eastern, 12:05 a.m. Central on the Sartoba Media YouTube channel. Music by J. Cool.
Where my soldiers, right side, Commanders. Where my soldiers, left side,
Welcome back to Total Football Talk, episode 87. We are streaming live right now, or syndicated if you're watching this in the replay. I am your host for today's program, Drew Willingham, for episode 87. As Sick Diggy in the comments through our commercial break had this to say: with a name like Dresser Win, one would think he would be dressed for success. Or maybe I'm looking too much into his name. Maybe so, maybe not. But for this, Dresser Win is definitely not dressed for success. With that being said, we're going to take this on into the 2-minute drill for episode 87 of the program. And with the 2-minute drill, we're going to preview week 1 of the CFL action. And We actually did this last week, but I was looking to do it with Cole for this episode, but unfortunately he was not able to make it for today. So for a treat for you guys, what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually share that part of the program, not the first game, because we actually just recapped that with the Rough Riders and the Red Blacks, but I will share with you the actual content from this past week's episode. And let me see if it'll allow me to share the video right here. So it might. No. It's not even doing that. It's sharing the actual screen. So let me see if it'll allow me. Let me see what the timestamp was on it, 156.57. All right. Well, we'll just do that. Actually, that way I can share with you guys what this is. So I'm going to stop this fumble messing in the moment there, ladies and gentlemen, because I thought I had this set up for during the commercial break. But yes, I'm going to share with you that portion of this past week while I'm still on the screen here with you and show you what Mr. McCoffey and I chose for our picks. Here's episode 86. I have to correct 156.57 is what I'm looking for. Right. The Red Blacks had their flashes in the pan last year, and I just have a good feeling about them for this 2025 year. But when it comes to my team, known as the Riders, I had to get one more in before we go to the next game. I got the Rough Riders winning this Thursday night's game on June 5th, 9:30 p.m. Eastern time on TSN. Everybody out there, make sure you find some time to watch that game. Our next one on Friday, the Toronto Argonauts. Keep in mind all teams are even keel right now. They're all 0-0. All right. Toronto Argonauts 0-0 against the 0-0 Montreal Alouettes. This Friday, the only Friday game, TSN, 7 p.m. Eastern time, this upcoming Friday. Mr. McCoffey, what are your thoughts on this game? Who wins and what?
It's a rematch of the East Final from last season. And Montreal, things have changed in Montreal. The quarterback has changed. Davis Alexander is now the quarterback at the helm. Hello. Davis Alexander is now the quarterback at the helm with the Montreal Alouettes. Toronto Argonauts right now, it's kind of a right now Chad Kelly is still working on that broken ankle that he broke. It was a devastating injury in the East Final last year on the turf at McGill Stadium. Nick Arbuckle is going to be the likely guy who will start on Friday. Or it could be Cameron Dukes. We don't know. This is a good matchup. I know for me, it's my Montreal Alouettes, who are my team. They're playing the team that beat them in the East Final last year. Toronto riding that momentum all the way to the Winter Grey Cup. Actually, I'm going to take Toronto in this one. I think Toronto, they return a lot from their core from last year's team. They believed in Nick Arbuckle, who got them that championship, was the MVP of that Grey Cup game. But you got to watch out for Montreal. Tyson Philpott is back in the lineup after missing most of last year with a foot injury. So he'll be a guy to watch for the Alouettes. But I think Toronto, look at their season started nicely with a win away in Montreal.
No, that's a good pick, and I agree with that. Toronto. So Chad Kelly is back.
He is back. But I think he's going to be the guy. He's going to be second string for a bit as his ankle fully heals. Because last year, if you saw in the East Final when he broke his ankle, that was not pretty. It was not pretty. It was pretty bad.
And to make sure I'm not misremembering, you have Toronto winning on the road.
Toronto winning on the road.
And this is over your Montreal Alouettes.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really disagree with you much, but even though I'm kind of going into this blind, Gotta disagree about something within these picks. And I'm going to go with your favorite team, the Montreal Alouettes. I'm picking Montreal Alouettes in the upset here over the Toronto Argonauts, who had a pretty solid year last year. I mean, both teams did. They faced each other in the playoffs. And this could be a sign and a good test for games to come. This could be easily, as far as our CFL games recap next week, our game of the week. It could potentially be.
I'll be watching. I'll be watching.
Same. We'll have to be firing, kind of like what we did last year during CFL games, firing off messages back and forth, because there's some good action in the CFL, and arguably, some better action in the CFL than the UFL. But the UFL has actually improved this year, in my opinion, from covering it this year in comparison to last year. There are some dumpster Pelican teams like the Brahmas and the Showboats who are at the bottom of the league, but I don't think we're going to have that problem as much with the CFL. Hopefully not. Hopefully we'll have some competition out here, and we'll see it. And what I predict now is, I'll just go on the record by saying it, I predict that this will be our game of the week next week. Saturday, we have 2 games, Mr. McCoffey. We have 2 games out here to wrap up week 1 of CFL. And the Hamilton Tiger Cats are on the road against the Calgary Stampeders. Saturday, 7 o'clock p.m. Eastern time on TSN. June 7th is upcoming Saturday, a week from tomorrow. What are your thoughts? The Hamilton Tiger Kitties pull it off against the Calgary Stampeders. Both of these teams had their ups and downs last year, had their battles. The Stampeders finished at the bottom of the West Division at 5-12-1, and the Tiger Kitties finished at 7-11. Shout out to 7-11, great Slurpees, but not for this situation. 7-11 for the record for the Tiger Kitties. What are your thoughts? Could this be the Dumpster Pelican Bowl of the week, or will we see improvement out of these 2 teams?
I think we'll see improvement out of these 2 teams, especially Calgary. Calgary was they're kind of in a, not so much a rebuild, but kind of a reset. As I mentioned, Vernon Adams Jr. will probably be the starting quarterback of this team in week 1. But don't forget, they have a particular quarterback who has spent time in the XFL and the NFL, and PJ Walker as his backup. So if Vernon Adams happens to have an injury or he's playing poor, sometimes it's very feast or famine with Mr. Adams. Either he's very Jameis Winston like. He's either throwing touchdowns or he's throwing picks. High risk, high reward guy. Hamilton, meanwhile, they got to get off to a better start than they did last year. They were actually in playoff contention up until the last month of the season last year.
We covered it, yes.
Yeah,
absolutely. You're getting hype.
Yeah. And Bo Levi Mitchell was in the conversation for most outstanding player, even though he was on a losing team. Hamilton's got to get off to a fast start if they want to compete in that East Division. I think the East Division is pretty wide open, in my opinion. At the same time, I think Calgary is much improved from last year. They'll have some stability at quarterback. They don't have Jake Mayer. He went over to Saskatchewan. He's now backing up. He's now backing up Trevor Harris. But they have some stability at the quarterback position with Vernon Adams Jr. and PJ Walker. They have Dominic Rhymes, who signed with the Stampeders, who gives them another weapon at wide receiver, along with Reggie Bigleton and the returning Malik Henry. So I think Calgary, and also they have a running game. Don't forget they have a bit of a running game. So I'm going to go with the Calgary Stampeders in this one. I think that the ponies get off to a good start in 2025.
I like that take. I really do, because the Stampeders need some type of spark, man. They really do. 5-12-1 was just a terrible way to go down last year. They were 4-12-1 going into their last game of the year and absolutely won that one. But on the road, they did okay at home. They were 4-4 on the road at home, but they were 1-8 on the road last year. That's what was their ultimate demise. And this game right here helps out their cause. If they got a 50-50 shot pretty much of winning this game. So I'm going with the Calgary Stampeders as well. I'm going to side with you on this. I mean, we do have a couple comments here. Let's the Tiger Kitties. It says the Tiger Kitties, Melvin says, and Hamilton wins this game based on the name itself.
Okay,
Now,
Melvin. All right.
Melvin has a decent take on that, but I'm actually going to side with you on this, Ryan, because Calgary has a 50-50 shot at winning at home. And based on what they did last year, and if they improved or declined enough, I feel like they have a better shot at winning this game at home than the Tiger Kitties, who, even though they had a 7-11 record down the stretch towards the end when they had a chance to at least enter the playoffs, they couldn't lock it up. And is Bo Levi Mitchell playing again or what?
He is.
Okay. So he's starting or not?
Yes, he's starting.
Okay. Do you see, before we get to the last game, do you see that they have a similar year to last year with him at the helm, or does he not finish the year as a starting quarterback?
Their defense started to get better as the season went on when they brought in Chris Jones, from who was fired by the Edmonton Elkamos, bringing him in as the defensive coordinator. Their defense got better as the season went along. I don't know if I remember correctly, I think he's back at the helm at defensive coordinator. But if their defense doesn't flounder like it did last season at times, I think Hamilton has a chance to get to the playoffs this year. Also got to stay healthy.
Yeah, stay healthy. That's the important thing. That's what we saw. It affects a lot of teams that have momentum out there. It takes one injury to one of the sides, whether it's offense, defense, or special teams, whatever that impact there is. Somebody that's making that impact is gone. It makes an impact to how these games turn by the end of the game. And for that, based on the first game of the year, I'm going with your take here with Calgary Stampeders, as we have one more game to look at for this upcoming week. For the last game of the same day on Saturday, you have the Edmonton Elkamos, as we said from last year, taking on the BC Lions in good old British Columbia, 10 o'clock p.m. Eastern time on TSN this upcoming Saturday, the 7th. Who are you taking and why there, Mr. McCall?
I had to think about this game. You know who's playing at halftime
Who?
in BC? Snoop Dogg.
No way.
Snoop Dogg is the halftime show for the BC Lions home opener this year.
Snoop D-O-double-G?
Yes, sir.
All right. Snoop D-O-double-G in the house.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Halftime. Nice.
Halftime. That's the halftime show. As for the game itself, I'm gonna. This is gonna be my real upset special here, Mr. Willingham. You can put this down on the piece of paper. I'm gonna go with the Elks in this game. He's writing on a piece of paper. I'm going with the Elks. I'm gonna go with the Elks in this game. He's strengthening the universe. It's landing somewhere. Anyway,
He's in a paper airplane in the air.
There we go.
Riding around with my ninjas that just don't care.
I'm going to go with the Elks. And the primary reason why, Trey Ford. Trey Ford is going to get to the keys to the kingdom. He proved it last year, especially in the second half of this year, that he could play in this league. He can play professional quarterback. Now, granted, it's not going to say. I was going to say it's on a short leash because his backup is Cody Fajardo, 2023 Grey Cup MVP, who was traded by the Montreal Alouettes to the Elks in exchange for the law offices of, I can't remember his name all of a sudden, but guy has a great beard. Let's put it that way. But Trey Ford, you can do it with his arm, you can do it with his legs, and I think if the Elks can short up on defense, and I know last year the Lions had an identity crisis at quarterback at times, like I mentioned before, with Nathan Rourke and Vernon Adams kind of exchanging places. But Nathan Rourke's got the job. If Nathan Rourke can put it together, it'll be a close game. But I think Edmonton can shock some people this year. I don't think they're going to be as bad as people think. So I'm going to go with my episode of the week here. I think it's going to be the Edmonton Elks beating the BC Lions. It'll be a tight game. Much like last year, and again, remember, Edmonton was also in the conversation for the playoffs in the West last year. Playoffs coming under the wire, but they also lost a lot of close games too. I think they could probably win some of those close games back and possibly make a playoff run. But it starts in week 1, and it's going to be in front of a capacity crowd at BC Place. But I think the Elks can take week 1. That's what I'm going to go with.
Yeah, I like that take with the Edmonton Elkimos. I mean, I'll say his name right, Cody Fajardo.
There you go.
Fajardo, like I was saying for half of the season last year. You corrected me like 6 times, and I just kept saying it. Just kept sliding in there. But, yeah, it's Cody Fajardo, out there getting it done. Edmonton Elkimos time. And they need to start this off on a hot streak because, last year, very similar to the Tiger Kitties, 7-11 record. Now, they weren't necessarily dead last in the league, but they're also 4th in a league in a division of 5, okay? Yeah. Because there's 9 teams in the CFL league, which makes it different there's a lot more buys that you have to account for. And the fact that you're 4 out of 5, it still makes you kind of like in the territory of the Tiger Kitties. So with that being said, you have a lot more to prove, and you need this win right here. I'm going with the Edmonton Elks winning this game as we look at our 4th game of the week that rounds out our first week in CFL action, with the Winnipeg Blue Bombers having the first bye here for week 1. What is your take on the Blue Bombers going into week 2, with their bye week? Do you think that this team is going to be a competitive team when we come back and discuss them next week?
I think they still will be. Zach Caleros is back. He's healthy. Brady Oliveira is back. He's healthy. I think this is going to be the last couple. This is going to be the 1 or 2 years that you're going to see this team that has been together for such a long time. This might be the last run. They've been to 5 consecutive Grey Cups, and they've won 2 of them. They lost the last 3, but this is the tail end of what I was going to be one of the great runs in the modern history of the CFL. I think their outlook is good. I think they win the West. They won't win it by that much, but this team is good enough, and Mike O'Shea is a very good coach. Is a very good guy who could scout talent and put the right players on the field. So I think their outlook is good for this season. I like I said, it's the last of I think they're on the tail end of their run here, and I think they want to make the most of it, especially with the Grey Cup being in Winnipeg this season. They want to win in front of their home fans, probably as a last hurrah before guys retire or they go elsewhere. So I think the Blue Bombers' chances are very good this year of winning another Western Division title.
Solid take with them, and it'll be interesting to see how they can come back after having the first week off. As so many weeks in the CFL. It's 21 weeks, right?
Yep.
Yeah, 21. And the amount of buys that these teams get, and each and every week, it'd be interesting. But
you wouldn't have so many bye weeks if you had a 10th team. Come on.
But it's just like last year, where the cool thing is, once the UFL season starts, we have professional football all the way into the end of the year because, now with this being the final week of the UFL that's starting now tonight at 8, UFL week 10, next week is the playoffs, which, the winners of those 2 games go and meet in the UFL championship. And then we have CFL all the way into the NFL season. So great time to be a football fan. If you miss the UFL, you can watch the best of the best here over the next few weeks, and then that's over. And then you have the CFL, which we just, gave you the preview of. A lot of things to look at and look forward to when it comes to the world of professional football, and you can get it here on Total Football Talk. Well, there we go. And that was from this past week on episode 86, because with Ryan being here this past week for 86, we had this upcoming week to preview, and we previewed, of course, the UFL, but then the CFL. So with that, it was good timing to kind of be able to add that in for this week too. So that way we were able to repeat the preview for this upcoming week for CFL, because we have a game tonight and 2 of them tomorrow to look forward to. In Canadian football, it is back. For those of you out there who've been waiting, we had the first game last night. My team, the Saskatchewan Roughriders, absolutely came through with the victory. And as you saw for the preview that we have for the upcoming 3 games, the one here in just a little bit at 7 o'clock p.m. Eastern time, between the Argonauts and the Alouettes, you saw that breakdown. You saw the Tiger Kitties and the good old Stampeders. And then you saw the Edmonton Elkamos and the BC Lions preview there with Mr. McCoffey in this past segment for the 2-minute drill. And with that being said, we're going to take it into the final segment of the show, and that is the post game.
As long as it's long. That's great. I love it.
Here at the post game, it's basically we just give our final words to round out the program. And I just wanted to shout out, those of you out there who've been watching this live, whether you're watching on TikTok, I'm not TikTok. Soon, I got to finish setting that up, but soon we will be streaming live on TikTok. But right now, it's Twitch, X, formerly known as Twitter, and good old YouTube. So if those of you watching on those platforms commenting, for some reason, X's comments don't show up here on the live stream. I have to go back and look at those later. But then you've got the ones for Twitch, which one of them was an ad. I'm not going to show that one because, of course, somebody had to drop an ad there. Shameless plug. But with this one, got to give a shout out to good old Sick Diggy. As he says, I think the UFL should have an additional couple of weeks next season, not to play, but give each team 2 bye weeks. You can play 10 weeks straight and not get banged up or possibly injured. I think that the only really way they can do that, and I like the suggestion, but I think the only way that they can do that is if they add another couple teams to make it to where you have to give a bye, at least 1 bye, because the NFL has 17 games and only does 1 bye. I think that 1 is good. The CFL has 21 weeks, so you kind of have to work in 2 byes. Plus, with the fact that they only have 9 teams in the league, if you add a 9th team to the UFL and you add a couple more weeks, or you make it 11 weeks instead of 21. 13 weeks instead of 21 or something like that, make it an odd number of weeks to make it to where you can get that bye weekend. I think they can make it work that way. But in order to get 2 byes, you have to have a really long season, and the CFL has a really long season. So for that, I agree with the fact that they need to figure out a way to get a bye in there. But 2 of them, I don't think that would be a good idea for as short of a season. I don't know how they would make that work, unless they made it to where you had 3 games in a weekend instead of 4, or however they did it. That would be a good suggestion. I do like that, but we'll have to see how that goes. There's a suggestion box out there. Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, we're coming. We're going to bring that one out there. Get him a bye week out there in the UFL when it comes to suggestion from good old Sick Diggy. And Sick says, I'm going to be checking out Toronto and Montreal. People forget about the rivalry between the 2 cities. Yes, and that's something that Ryan helped me get acquainted to last year when I started covering CFL. I mean, I'd watched it sporadically in the past, but never really truly got invested into it until, with doing this podcast, I decided I wanted to get invested into other forms of professional football, and UFL and CFL rounded out. So with that, with the UFL and now into the CFL, this rivalry right here between the two leagues is top tier. I would have to say between Toronto and Montreal. And if it wasn't for McCoffey, I would not be aware of that, as he is a fan of the Montreal Alouettes. Now, with me being a fan of the Saskatchewan Roughriders, there's nothing that you're going to tell me to make me pick another team. And even if they were just absolutely trash, I would still get excited about saying the name. I hope that never comes to fruition. But right now, they're 1-0 and looking pretty good. Keep that momentum going strong. But for this game with Toronto and Montreal that we have to watch for week 1, it's absolutely big. And it's going to be tonight here in about 45 minutes. So that's why I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up here shortly. But this episode, for episode 87, was interesting. I did not know until, I would say, very close to the original start time of 2 p.m. Eastern time that we were going to have to make a shift, that Cole might not be able to make it because he had, some personal things going on, career-wise that kind of slowed him down today. Wouldn't be able to get him, away from work until, later on. And I still haven't heard back from him. So I'm guessing he's still crushing over there. With that being said, I did the best I could to rock and roll solo with you guys today. Luckily for myself, Ryan and I had done the preview of week 1 for CFL last week, and I was able to kind of plug that in and eat up about 20 minutes of airtime to give me a little bit of a breather from talking solo today. This program is very fun, and it's tough when we're rocking solo, but it wouldn't be possible without those of you out there in the chat to keep it going. So thank you very much for those of you watching on whichever platform, whether it's comin Media or Sartoba Media, where the struggle is real to be awesome. In moments when we're a pinch, Cole's been there too, to where I've had to not be able to show up, and he's had to roll solo and knows exactly how I'm feeling today with this. I'm not mad or anything or like that towards him, but it definitely is a challenge when you have a 2-person show written that one person has to carry out, and it's challenging to do that. So did the best I could. I brought the best I could for today, and hopefully you guys who watched this all the way through to this point to even see this were at least entertained enough to make it to this point. So thank you very much for tuning in. I greatly appreciate it as always. We're going to cut it a little bit short today because of the fact that I'm rolling solo, but hopefully that's not a total
surprise, motherfucker.
But, with that, I wanted to at least, give you the heads up of that's where we're going with this. And we'll have much more to talk about next week within the recap of the conference finals of the UFL, recap of the first week of the CFL, as well as a preview for the UFL championship and a preview for week 2 of the CFL next week. Not sure how the lineup will be. Hopefully it will be myself and Cole next week. We shall see. I have to talk with him more over the weekend, see how he's doing and with everything that's going on. But, wishing him well, and glad that, we were able to get this episode going today, that I was able to make it happen, and that, the powers that be made it to where I could show up here today to do so. With all that being said, you have a great weekend as well, Sick Diggy over there in Norway. Greatly appreciate you as always for being like our number 1 fan of the Total Football Talk tribe out here in the streams. There's other people out there that jump in and out, and they don't really converse much, and even people that are supposed to be, supporters of the stream. And I will at least say with my closing thought in the post game, as in 2025, I've taken a major step back of being as supportive as I was to certain individuals who are not consistent with doing the same. But for those of you out there like yourself, Sick Diggy, who show up each and every week, very rarely miss an episode. And if you do miss a live one, you go back and watch it in the replay. Those of you out there who are true, real, and loyal, greatly appreciate you out there who are still watching this show, even at a different time that it was originally scheduled to do so. Just because, honestly, if I know I got to do it solo, I'm going to push it back a little bit longer. 1, I wanted to give Cole some time to see if he could make it, but unfortunately he couldn't, which is understandable. But for 2, if I'm going to be going solo, I got to make sure I'm fully awake. And those of you out there who know my struggles with my work schedule, with the time frame of it, working into the middle of the night and then still trying to do something earlier in the day, it's a struggle for me to get up. So I did my best, but if I'm going solo, if it gets pushed back a couple hours, it's that it's because I'm going solo. But other than that, hopefully next week we can do it at 2. We can rock and roll, make it happen. Hopefully my man out there is doing good, ready to rock and roll for next week. We shall see for episode 88. Regardless, I will return for episode 88 of Total Football Talk next Friday. You have been watching episode 87 as it is streaming right now, whether it's live or syndicated. I greatly appreciate you being true, being real, being loyal, seeing this show and watching it through and through, whether you're watching it on comin Media or on Sartoba Media, where the struggle is real to be awesome. I am your host for today's program, hopefully your co-host next week for episode 88, Drew Willingham. And like my guy Cole says, when he exits the show or gets us ready to exit the show, like in football, when it comes to life, keep your head up and always remember that you got to play until the whistle blows. And for myself, that I say each and every episode on the way out. As always, please stay safe out here in these streets. You don't have to go home, but you got to get on out of here. As always, stay safe out here in these streets.